I don't want to do it, Drew. I don't want to film outside anymore. Not today, not today. Hey, it's Dave from the camera store, and we are stepping inside today to talk about macro photography. I am very happy to be shooting inside today. Right now it's about -27 outside with a wind chill about -6,000. So very happy to be inside, and this is where I get a chance to really play around with some macro photography. It doesn't take a whole lot of gear to get set up and started, but you can have a lot of fun with it. I'm of course going to talk about a bunch of different gear that I'm using today, but also the techniques I'm using you can apply to every camera system. Now hopefully this inspires you to start actually shooting some macro photography and seeing the tiny little world all around you. Now the first thing we need to think about when we're shooting macro is what lens we're going to choose. Now part of that is figuring out what subjects we're going to be shooting as well. Are we shooting an entire butterfly or just the butterfly's eyes, for instance? Now I'm not an entomologist, so I don't have a selection of bugs and stuff to shoot today, but I do have some very willing models with me that are going to help showcase what I'm trying to achieve today. Now what makes a macro lens a macro lens? We often see zoom lenses, for instance, will have a macro rating to them, but they don't really shoot true macro. They'll often be good for shooting sort of large flowers or 4x6 images, something like that, but they're not a true macro. Lenses like this 100mm macro lens from Canon, for instance, has the ability to shoot 1:1 macro. What does this mean? It means that it can reproduce something life-size on the sensor. And that's when we're really starting to talk about true macro lenses. Now if you want to go even closer than that, we have some other lenses in the market that'll go significantly closer, but they all represent their own challenges. So 100mm focal length is a very popular focal length when it comes to shooting macro. Now this is the Canon 100L series macro in the RF lineup, but there's other selections. Sony makes a 90mm. Nikon makes a very good Z105 macro lens. We have the Panasonic 45mm lens, which is the equivalent. So it's a great focal length. So why is that 100mm range so popular amongst all these manufacturers when it comes to shooting macro? Well, a big reason for that is the ability to have a great field of view, but also a nice shooting distance. I can be at a reasonable distance away that I'm not spooking some small critters, but also it gives me that nice perspective. Now, if I want to change it up a little bit, I did bring some other lenses as well. We did bring along the Laowa 2.5 to 5x ultra macro lens. So it has its own shooting challenges. We're going to get into all these lenses here in just a second. Now we're ready for our very first shot. I have my subject inside of a light tent here. Now this is a very cool device here. This is from Color Monkey. This is their Folio Studio. And it's a self-illuminated box that basically produces a shadowless environment for any product put inside of it. It's great for putting products onto eBay, things like that is what they're designed for. Now I have my lens mounted here, the 100mm RF macro on the Canon R5. I have a lower ISO setting, I'm at f2.8, and I have my focus set for where I want it to. Lean in, take my shot of Captain Canuck here, a couple shots there, and what do I see? First thing I notice is that it's tough to keep Captain Canuck in the right frame. I'm all over the place. The other thing I notice is not everything's in focus. First thing we're going to address is how to stabilize the camera and get more consistent shots this way. Something that's so important when it comes to photographing static subjects, especially like this, is a quality tripod. And the reason is it allows me to keep the same framing as I adjust my settings on my camera and also my lighting to get the best results. Now if I have to hand hold it, I'm trying to do too much at once and it's just not going to happen very well. So for me, how flexible a tripod is really is valuable. This is the Vanguard VO3 Plus 263 AB tripod, and it is very, very flexible, but the biggest feature of it is the ability that I can raise the center column up, but also articulate it to a different angle. This allows me, especially when it comes to macro photography, to get angles that are really tough to get into or handhold otherwise. I really like that feature on this tripod, and you'll see how much more consistent the shots are when I'm shooting this way. Now that I have my camera locked down on a tripod, I can easily recreate that shot over and over again and adjust my camera settings. Now the previous shot I took, the face was in focus, but the arms weren't in focus. Now in this case I want everything to be in focus, so I need to address that. The other part with depth of field that's tricky is the closer you get to your subject, the shallower that depth of field becomes. So even with this lens here, stopping it down to f16, I'm still not going to get the full range of focus that I want. So then we have to look at some other techniques. The one big one we're going to talk about is focus stacking. So focus stacking is a very, very cool technique, and it's easier than ever. Now, in the past, what we would do is we would take a lens and we would find the minimum focusing distance we wanted to capture, and then we'd take a picture, and then we would focus past that, take a picture, focus past that, take a picture, focus past that, take a picture. And then in post-production software like Photoshop, we would stack the sharpest part of each photo together to have this great broad depth of field. Now, it's easier now than ever. There's multiple cameras on the market that allow you to do it in camera. It makes it so simple. Cameras like the Canon R5 here with this 100mm macro, I basically show the minimum focusing point I want and allow it to rack focus for me. And then once I have all those images, I can go into Photoshop and stack them all together and have a shot that has unbelievable range of focus that I just can't get in camera. So with this Canon 100mm macro lens, I can do one-to-one reproduction. In fact, I can go 1.4 times with this particular lens. But what if I want to go even closer than that? Laowa makes a very cool lens called their Ultra Macro Lens, which allows you to magnify a subject 2.5 times to 5 times life size. Now, I will warn you though, this is a very tricky lens to shoot with. It's very cool to see things that the human eye can't see. I mean, the detail is so amazing when you get down that close. But it is a very tricky lens to shoot with. The fact is we don't really have a focusing ring. The way you work this lens is you basically move the entire camera forwards or backwards, or the subject forwards or backwards till it's in focus in front of the lens. You dial in the magnification that you want and you bring the subject or the lens to the distance you need to acquire focus. Now, that is incredibly tricky. This is a lens you cannot use handheld. It just does not work. So one of the best things that I found for it is not just a good stable tripod, but is a focus rail system. This is a very cool bit of kit because it allows you to incrementally move the camera forwards or backwards till you achieve fine focus. Trust me, this is one of the best purchases you're going to buy if you're going to use a lens with this kind of extreme magnification. We're using our own house brand, the PhotoRepublik macro focus rail, and what I love about this one is that it doesn't just go back and forth, but actually goes side to side. So when you're dealing with just the head of a Lego figurine, it is nice to be able to have that fine precision control. So we've talked about stabilizing the camera with a tripod and having some nice little tools like this focus rail when it comes to stabilization and really fine-tuning it. However, a lot of times with macro photography, lighting is a big challenge. Now we're fortunate enough to have this Color Monkey photo box here, which has given us a really nice even flat lighting. There's almost too flat at times, and if we want to add some additional lighting or some fill lighting, small little LED panels like this one here work fantastic. We're often so close to the subject when we're shooting macro that our own body is blocking the sun, for instance, if we're shooting a flower outside. It's nice to have some kind of reflector or tiny light sources like this that I can easily handhold beside the lens that's going to really give us a nice fill. Some of them even give you the more flexibility that they're RGB lights that give you some nice light, so I can change the color and really add a splash of color to my scenes. So having a tripod is very cool because you can use your self-timer, get your lights in position, just hand holding them, and let the camera take the picture. So even though we are using continuous lights in here in the studio, I do encourage you to step outside. I mean, it is super cold outside where we are, so we thought we would channel our inner Don Komarechka here and play with some frozen bubbles. So these shots here are all taken within a couple minutes of each other, and it's pretty fun to do, and it just sort of lends to the fact that you can take macro photography and create these tiny little scenes anywhere. The shots of my little astronaut playing with the new Earth bubble there was shot on a railing of an industrial building. Like, it's nothing very exciting, but you can't tell because it's such a tiny little section of a scene. This is the fun with macro. You get to sort of see the world in a completely different way, and depending on the focal length you're using and the magnification you're using, you can see things in a whole new light. So I highly encourage you, go outside, play with these lenses, take them out, see what kind of macro photography you like to do. And whether it's simply just documenting something, you're a big stamp collector or a big coin collector, you can take some shots of that. But if you want to create some fun scenes here, I know my kids and I have always had a little bit of fun playing with Lego because we have a ton of it. So why not have a little bit of fun with it? And macro is a great way to experiment with that. Well, our day is wrapping up here, and I have to get back into a very cold car and head home. But I feel I've only scratched the surface of what macro photography is all about. So hopefully some of the concepts I've explained kind of come through and when it comes to talking about lens selection and a tripod and macro focus rail and lighting, for instance. And I hope it kind of inspires you to re-look at things in your own house or in your own world and how you'd like to capture it. Seeing things up close can be a very interesting experience. Exploring the very small world around you, whether it's creating fantasy scenes or just documenting your stamp collection, macro photography can be very challenging but also very rewarding. Now, I, of course, want to know what you guys thought of this episode. Is there something you want me to dig deeper into that you want more knowledge about? I certainly can help you out with that. Now, make sure you leave comments down below. Follow us both on Instagram, and please subscribe. Hit that notification bell. We'll catch you again next time. Now, I'm not an entomologist, so I don't have a great selection of bugs and creepy crawlers. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, thank you very much for watching. And if you want to check out more recent episodes, click up here. And if you are Canadian and you want to shop local, check out thecamstore.com down here.